3 million pages of evidence, thousands of unsealed flight logs, millions of data points, names, themes, and timelines connected. You are listening to the Epstein Files, the world's first AI-native investigation into the case that traditional journalism simply could not handle.
Welcome back to the Epstein Files.
It's almost like the digital equivalent of a burn bag. You have this huge collection of evidence. We're talking names, logs, all these connections. And it's released by the very institution that's meant to prosecute these crimes.
And then, just as quickly as it appears,
it vanishes without a clear explanation, just gone.
And that really is the central mystery we're diving into today. It revolves around this thing called the Pinpoint database, this collection of files that was released and then, as you said, reportedly deleted by the U.S. Justice Department.
Files that were specifically about Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking operation.
And his connections to, well, some incredibly powerful political figures.
Exactly. So today we're going to try and map out what happened with those files. We're going to explore what we know is in this Pinpoint database and really question the DOJ's handling of all this evidence.
And that's not all. We're also going to look at those 2015 court documents involving Epstein and Maxwell. I feel like for many people, that was the moment the wall of silence really started to show cracks.
Oh, absolutely. Then we have to talk about Epstein's death. The swirling theories, the official story of suicide versus the widespread belief that it was a homicide. We'll look at it from a few different angles, including the psychological one.
And then finally, and I think this is so important for context, we're going to step back in time.
Way back to 1996.
Right, because to understand the crimes, you really have to understand the era they started in. We've got some archival news from that year that shows just how distracted the world was while this entire web was being spun.
It's the perfect environment for a predator to build a network.
So let's dive right in. I want to start with that first piece of evidence, that Pinpoint database. Because this isn't just some rumor from an online forum, is it? We're talking about a specific, tangible archive.
That's right. It was managed by the Courier newsroom and specifically the work of an investigative journalist, Karen Stevenson. And it's so critical to make that distinction right at the top.
Why is that so important?
Because we're not dealing with leaked hearsay or, anonymous sources. We are talking about an archive of documents that were at one point officially public, made public by the United States government.
So this database, Pinpoint, it exists because the internet doesn't really let you hit delete.
That's the perfect way to put it. It's a testament to that fact. Someone is always watching, and in this case, thank goodness they were.
So the source material we have lays out a pretty disturbing timeline. The U.S. Justice Department starts to release these documents, some multimedia too, all related to the Epstein investigation.
Which is, pretty standard procedure in some cases. Yep. FOIA requests get fulfilled, cases close, information comes out. That part isn't weird.
Then it gets weird.
Then it gets very weird because they started deleting them.
Just taking them down.
Taking them down from the official government servers. And that's the whole reason the Pinpoint database exists. Stevenson and his team at Courier, they saw what was happening. It was happening in real time.
They saw the files going up.
And then they saw them coming right back down. So they just started grabbing everything. They archived everything the DOJ released before it could be totally scrubbed.
That's incredible. It's like a digital game of whack-a-mole. Mm-hmm. You offer a moment of transparency and then immediately snatch it back. I mean, why would the DOJ even do that?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Is it just staggering incompetence? Is it some kind of technical error?
Or is it something much more deliberate?
Well, let's look at what was in those deleted items. That usually gives you a clue about the motive. If you delete a blank page or a duplicate document, that's just housekeeping. Nobody cares.
But that's not what this was.
Not at all. The source is very specific here. It mentions that the deleted items included materials that explicitly connected Jeffrey Epstein to President Donald Trump.
Okay, let's just pause and unpack that really carefully. We are looking at a source that claims a federal body, the DOJ, actively removed evidence from the public record that linked a sitting or former president to a federal sex trafficking investigation.
It's a monumental claim. And it raises, just immense questions about institutional integrity. And we have to be absolutely clear for you listening. We are reporting on what the archive contains and what the source says was deleted.
We're not saying this proves guilt or innocence or anything like that regarding the former president. We're asking the question. why did the evidence itself vanish from the official record?
Exactly. If the information was exculpatory, great, leave it up. If it was damning, well, the public has a right to know, leave it up. Why delete it?
The act of deletion is the story.
Precisely. Transparency shouldn't come with an edit button or a delete key. If the documents were irrelevant, why release them in the first place? And if they were relevant, why on earth would you delete them?
So this pinpoint database, it's like a rogue server of truth. It preserved these links.
It ensured they remained available for public scrutiny even after the DOJ's retraction. It really suggests there's a struggle happening behind the scenes.
Struggle between who?
Well, I think it's between those inside the system who believe the public has a right to know the full, unvarnished scope of this entire network.
Yeah.
And those who are perhaps trying to protect the reputation of the institution.
Or specific people.
Or specific, very powerful individuals. When you start deleting files that link to a president, you're not just doing IT maintenance anymore. You are making a profoundly political decision.
And the scope of the data is just massive. This isn't one or two files. The source talks about data sets. It mentions data sets 1 through 8 and also data set 12 being uploaded.
And that numbering is fascinating, isn't it?
It is. 1 through 8 are there. 12 is there.
But the source notes that data sets 9, 10, and 11 were marked as pending.
It's like the missing 13th floor in a superstitious building.
It's exactly that. What is in data sets 9, 10, and 11? If datasets 1 through 8 contain material they were willing to release, and even some of that got deleted, what could possibly be hiding in those gaps?
In any kind of investigation, it's the missing data, the silence that's often the most telling.
It's where the most damaging connections usually lie.
It just underscores how important independent journalism and archiving is. If Courier hadn't saved these files, they would just be gone. A ghost in the machine.
We'd be relying on people's memories, which is always fallible. Now we have the digital receipts.
The source also makes a point to distinguish this DOJ database from what they call the Epstein estate files. Can you just clarify that distinction for us?
Sure. So when you hear about the Epstein estate files, that refers to his personal records. You know, the hard drives, the computers, the contents of the safes, the rumored 20,000 files found in his various properties.
So that's the criminal's own archive.
Exactly. The DOJ database, the stuff in Pinpoint, that's the government's file on him. It's the investigation logs, the evidence collected by the FBI, the court filings. They are two completely different views of the same sprawling crime.
One is the view from the inside, looking out, and the other is from the prosecution, looking in.
You've got it. And what's disturbing is that both of them seem to have these glaring holes where crucial information has just gone missing.
Which just brings us right back to that feeling of a cover-up, or at the very least of a very aggressive containment strategy.
And to attempt to control the narrative.
Which I guess makes archives like Pinpoint absolutely essential. Okay, so let's shift from the DOJ to the court system itself. We have to talk about the 2015 unsealed court documents involving Epstein and Maxwell. This feels like the moment the dam really started to break publicly.
I think that's right. This was a pivotal moment. These documents, they were actually from a 2015 defamation case, but they weren't unsealed and released to the public until around July of 2020.
And that timing is key because it was right after Maxwell's arrest.
Yes. And speaking of that arrest, our sources detailed this scene of Ghislaine Maxwell in handcuffs. I mean, she had been in hiding for a full year at that point, right?
The elusive socialite.
She effectively just vanished after Epstein died. Mm-hmm. And for such a long time, in the public imagination, she was just framed as the girlfriend or maybe the associate.
Right. Maybe a little complicit, but mostly just a bystander to his perversions, kind of floating on the periphery.
A party girl who got in over her head. But these documents, they just completely shatter that image.
Utterly. I mean, the source material uses a very, very strong label for her. They call her the Epstein pimp.
It's a heavy, ugly designation.
Yeah.
But when you look at the allegations, functionally, it fits. It just strips away that whole veneer of high society and polo matches. A pimp is someone who procures and exploits vulnerable people for the sexual gratification and profit of others.
And that is the absolute core of the accusation against her.
It is. But the allegations, they go even darker than just procurement. The force mentions specific claims that she threatened to kill victims if they ever thought about reporting the abuse.
And that detail is just chilling. It explains so much of the silence.
It really does. You know, we always hear people ask, why did they come forward sooner? Why did some of them go back? Well, imagine you are a young girl often from a really disadvantaged background, and this powerful, sophisticated woman who, hangs out with royalty, with presidents, looks you dead in the eye and says, I will have you killed.
Or we'll destroy your family.
It's not just coercion at that point. That is pure terror.
It completely changes the dynamic. It's not about money or influence anymore. It's a direct threat to your life.
And Maxwell, according to these damning allegations, was the enforcer. She was the one making sure the silence held. You could almost see her as the steel frame that kept this entire house of cards from collapsing for decades.
So when those 2015 documents were finally unsealed, that steel frame started to bend. The house of cards began to wobble because names came out.
Oh, the names came out.
The source lists some incredibly high-profile figures who were said to be frequenting Epstein's circles or his island. Prince Andrew,
A senior member of the British royal family, the Queen's own son.
Alan Dershowitz,
One of the most prominent, most famous legal minds in America. A man who defended clients in some of the biggest cases in modern history.
former President Bill Clinton.
A two-term president of the United States.
Yeah.
A global humanitarian figure. Just staggering.
Now, just like with the Trump connection in the DOJ files, we have to be really precise here. Being named in these documents doesn't automatically equal a conviction or guilt. But the source material expresses a ton of frustration about this. They talk about the mainstream media, the MSM, and the silence.
There was this palpable feeling that the media was just dragging its feet. You have these explosive names, literal royalty and presidents, popping up in court documents related to a sex trafficking ring. And yet the coverage felt so measured, so cautious.
Why do you think that is? Is it legal concerns or something else?
I think it feeds back into that same theme of institutional protection. When you start to pull the thread on someone like Clinton or Prince Andrew or even Dershowitz, you're not just taking on an individual, you are shaking the very foundations of massive institutions.
The monarchy, the presidency, the American legal system.
The pillars of Western society. So the system, almost by instinct, protects itself. Or at the very least, it hesitates. Editors get nervous. Lawyers get called in. Are we sure about this? Can we prove it? We don't want to get sued into oblivion.
So when the accused are that powerful, the whole machine of reporting just slows to a crawl.
It does. And that creates a vacuum where the public feels like they're being gaslit.
Yeah.
They see the names, they read the documents, but the official story seems to be lagging miles behind.
And Maxwell was the keeper of all those secrets. Her arrest must have been the moment the wind started to howl, and everyone in that infamous little black book probably just held their breath.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if she ever decided to talk, the implications were not just national, they were global.
And that brings us to the broader network, because we've talked about the DOJ, the courts, but what about the money? The legitimacy. You don't run an operation on this scale without a constant flow of funding and, I guess, social cover.
This is where we have to look at how the sausage was made, so to speak. How did Epstein acquire the funding and, more importantly, the prestige to operate in plain sight for so long?
We have a source here from TechMeme that talks about the MIT Media Lab. Now, for anyone listening who doesn't know, the MIT Media Lab is a huge deal.
Oh, it's the absolute pinnacle of academic and technological prestige. It's where the future is supposed to be invented. It's brilliant minds and big ideas.
And this source discusses a major controversy where the founder of the Media Lab, a man named Joi Ito, actually stated that accepting money from Jeffrey Epstein was justified.
Justified.
Yeah.
That's the word that just sticks in your throat, isn't it? And this admission, it came out after Epstein's 2008 conviction. They knew he was a registered sex offender. They knew. And yet, Ito and others at the lab, they made the calculation that the money was worth the moral compromise.
It implies a clear transaction, doesn't it? We'll take your dirty money, and in exchange, we'll give you the shine of our reputation.
That's it, exactly. It is reputation laundering. Epstein gave them cash, no strings attached, and they gave him legitimacy. He could walk into any room, anywhere in the world and say, I fund the MIT Media Lab. That one sentence shuts down a lot of questions.
The TrueAnon podcast source we have offers a really interesting way of looking at this. They talk about viewing Epstein not just as a singular criminal, but as a lens.
I love that concept. It's so powerful. Epstein as a lens. If you just look at him, all you see is a monster, a deviant. But if you look through him like a lens, the world around him comes into sharper focus.
You see the systems of power.
You see a perfect cross-section of it. You see how Silicon Valley and elite academia and Wall Street and high society all intersect and operate.
It doesn't just reveal his flaws, it reveals the flaws in the entire system.
It reveals that the system is incredibly porous to money. It almost doesn't matter where the money comes from, as long as there's enough of it. The source draws parallels to figures like, from the world of Tesla and Elon Musk, not to implicate them in these crimes at all, but to analyze the method.
The method of hacking the social hierarchy.
Right, it's social hacking. Epstein figured out the source code of the elite. He understood that if you donate to the right science projects, if you throw around buzzwords like transhumanism and future tech, if you associate with the visionaries, you gain a powerful shield.
You become one of us.
He hacked the neoliberal green political regime, as the source puts it so well. He integrated himself into these elite circles by speaking their language and, more importantly, by writing the checks. He understood that in that particular world, morality can often be secondary to vision and capital.
And because he was seen as one of us, he was protected. Until, of course, he wasn't. Which brings us to the event that effectively closed the book on his personal prosecution.
The death of Jeffrey Epstein.
August 10th, 2019, the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York.
A day that launched 1,000 conspiracy theories.
The sources we have on this are skeptical, to say the least. We've got the Violence Project discussing the psychology of it, but then we have sources with titles like Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself and The Curious Suicide.
It's become a cultural meme, a shorthand for, a government conspiracy. But let's set the meme aside and look at what the sources actually highlight.
Okay, so we have Dr. Frank Farley, who's a past president of the American Psychological Association, weighing in. He discusses the psychology of the suicide itself.
And from a purely clinical perspective, you can make a cogent argument. Here you have a textbook narcissist, a man whose entire existence was based on power and control. And now he's facing the rest of his life in a concrete box, stripped of all of it.
So taking his own life is the last act of control.
It's the final move for the ultimate control freak. He gets to decide how his story ends, not some judge or jury. So that's one plausible psychological frame.
But then you have the overwhelming public skepticism. The Pat Gray Unleashed source brings up the Clinton body count hashtag, which exploded after his death.
Which is a very old political conspiracy theory, but in this specific context, it was given a huge jolt of new life. The idea being that powerful people, whether it's the Clintons or any of the other names in those flight logs, had a very vested interest in his permanent silence.
The flight logs are mentioned here again, big celebrity names. So the motive for homicide in the eyes of the skeptics is just blindingly obvious.
It is. Too many powerful people had way too much to lose if he ever took the stand and started talking.
And that's really where the suicide versus homicide debate stems from, isn't it? It's not just about the forensic details like the broken hyoid bone or the security cameras that supposedly malfunction.
Although those details are incredibly suspicious.
They are, but the core of the suspicion comes from the utility of his death.
Who benefited?
Exactly, who benefited?
And the answer is, a lot of very powerful people probably slept a lot better that night, knowing he would never be cross-examined under oath.
And the ultimate tragedy of it, the real human cost, is captured so perfectly by that Pat Gray Unleashed source. They make the simple, devastating point: victims won't have their day in court.
And that's the ultimate injustice of his death. The criminal case against him was over. The victims were robbed of that final confrontation. They were robbed of a verdict from a jury of their peers. They were robbed of the chance to see him handcuffed and led away to spend the rest of his life in prison.
He escaped. One way or another, he escaped justice.
He did. He cheated the hangman or the judge, depending on which theory you subscribe to.
So we have these deleted government files, the unsealed documents with A-list names, the tech world money laundering his reputation, and his own highly suspicious death. But to really grasp how this all could have started, we need to go back. We need to look at the soil this whole toxic enterprise grew in.
We need to set the time machine to 1996.
Why 1996 specifically? The source material really points to this year as being pivotal.
It seems to be the origin point for the operation as we now know it. Some of the earliest documented victims, their stories begin around this era. This is when the network was really being built, when the web was first being spun.
1996. I mean, it feels like a completely different century now. We have a stack of archival news clips here from that year, NPR, Letter from America, NBC News Desk. And when you look through them, you get this palpable sense of a world that was just incredibly chaotic and distracted.
It was a year of immense political noise. And noise is the perfect cover for this kind of activity.
Let's start with the politics of the day. The Clintons. The source material mentions the Whitewater verdict was dominating the news cycle in May of 1996.
Whitewater. Do you remember how all-consuming that was? This obscure real estate deal in Arkansas that just ballooned into a massive, sprawling federal investigation. By 1996, the Clintons were under absolute siege. The independent counsel was digging through every file, every document.
The entire news cycle was just consumed by talk of subpoenas and grand juries.
So think about where the focus of the Justice Department and the FBI was. It was on real estate paperwork in Arkansas, the top brass, the media, all of the public's attention. It was laser-focused on the White House and this Whitewater scandal.
And it wasn't just Whitewater. It was a presidential election year, Clinton versus Bob Dole.
A really bitter election, too. Our source mentions the rising influence of single-issue groups. The political polarization we see today was really ramping up. You had the Contract with America revolution just a couple of years prior. This was a battle for the soul of the country happening on the nightly news every single night.
And the government itself was unstable. We have reports here on the aftermath of the federal government shutdown, which was late 95, bleeding into early 96.
The debt crisis, the shutdown. Washington, D.C. was completely gridlocked. The entire federal apparatus was hobbled. Funding was frozen. Federal agencies were running on absolute skeleton crews.
So you have to picture this scenario. The government is barely functioning. The president is being investigated for a financial scandal. A brutal election is raging. And in the middle of all that chaos, you expect the FBI or the DOJ to be effectively tracking a burgeoning sex trafficking ring being run by a wealthy, well-connected political donor.
It seems almost impossible. The institutional bandwidth just wasn't there. And a predator like Epstein would know that. He operated in the blind spot of a deeply distracted system.
And the distractions weren't just political. The culture itself felt like it was splitting apart. We have Alistair Cook's commentary from that time on O.J. Simpson and race.
Oh, the aftermath of the O.J. trial.
Yeah.
America was just split right down the middle. The verdict had come in late 95, and in 96, the civil trials were gearing up. The racial tensions it exposed were immense. The media was completely obsessed with every single detail of it.
It just sucked all the oxygen out of the room.
It really did. I mean, between Whitewater and O.J., was there even airtime for anything else?
Very, very little. And now think about the connections here. Epstein was building his network during this exact period. He was forging and strengthening his ties with the very people who were at the epicenters of these political storms.
While everyone else was watching the spectacle.
Exactly. We also see the rise of these debates around tech and science ethics. A source mentions the cloning of Dolly the sheep, which happened in 96.
The bridge to the future, as Clinton called it.
Mm-hmm.
Science was moving at this incredible speed, and the ethical frameworks were struggling to keep up. This is the exact environment where someone like Epstein, who styled himself as a science philanthropist, could start to make serious inroads.
He could present himself as this enlightened patron of the future.
While he was preying on the present, he walked right into this new world of biotech and the dot-com boom and said, I have money, I have vision, let me in.
And because everyone else was looking at Whitewater or OJ or the Dole-Clinton election, he got in.
He walked right through the front door. He leveraged the connections to Clinton, who was desperate for donors and allies during all the scandals. He leveraged his connections to Trump, who was the king of the New York social and real estate scene at the time. He was playing all sides while the country was busy arguing with itself.
We even have a source from a true crime show about a missing girl, Selena Mays, who vanished in 1996, a 12-year-old girl.
It's just a heartbreaking reminder, isn't it, that while the entire media ecosystem was talking about Whitewater and OJ, real children were disappearing. The most vulnerable people in our society were being exploited, and the systems that were meant to protect them were completely looking the other way.
So if we try to tie this all together, connecting the distractions of 1996 directly to the Epstein case, what's the big takeaway?
I think the takeaway is that predators like him don't operate in a vacuum. They thrive on chaos. They thrive when we, the public, are all looking at the big spectacle, the elections, the shutdowns, the celebrity trials, instead of looking at the quiet corners where the real abuse is happening.
And he leveraged the political connections he made during that chaotic era.
Connections that were forged and solidified while the rest of us were completely distracted. And now, decades later, we're left trying to piece it all together with deleted databases and heavily redacted core documents.
We're basically digging through the archaeology of corruption.
Trying to find the artifacts that tell us what really happened, not just the official story.
Let's just loop back to that DOJ database for a second before we wrap. The Pinpoint Archive. You said earlier that datasets 9, 10, and 11 are still pending, still missing.
Yes. the missing pieces of the puzzle.
In your experience with these kinds of cases, what usually hides in the missing data?
The most damaging connections, the stuff that is too explosive to even risk releasing. I mean, if data sets 1 through 8 are the appetizer, and even that contained links to a president that they felt they had to delete, one has to seriously wonder what's hiding in 9, 10, and 11 that hasn't seen the light of day.
It's the empty spaces on the shelf that often tell the real story.
Always. In these kinds of investigations, silence and omission can speak much louder than the noise.
We've covered so much ground. We started today with that pinpoint database, the digital evidence that the Justice Department itself released and then tried to delete, including those troubling links to Donald Trump. Then we moved to the Maxwell documents that exposed the connections to Prince Andrew and Bill Clinton and the justified funding from institutions like MIT.
And we saw how the chaotic, completely distracted world of 1996 created the perfect storm for this entire operation to take root and grow. It's an incredible story of power, distraction, and the very long, very hard fight for the truth.
Next time, we look at the specific legal battles, the lawyers, the settlements, and the breaking point. That's next time on the Epstein Files.
You have just heard an analysis of the official record. Every claim, name, and date mentioned in this episode is backed by primary source documents. You can view the original files for yourself at epsteinfiles.fm. If you value this data-first approach to journalism, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. It helps keep this investigation visible. We'll see you in the next file.